for part 2. We're going to talk about completing the square today. Completing the square. So yesterday we talked about extracting the square root, factoring, and what was the other one? Extracting the square root, factoring, and quadratic formula. Today is completing the square. Okay, if you have x squared plus 2x minus 6 equals 0, is that factorable? Is that factorable? X squared plus 2x minus 6 equals 0.
Yes.
Well, what are factors of 6? 2 and 3 or 1 and 6. Does 2 plus 3 or 2 minus 3 get me to 2?
Oh, no.
No. This is not factorable. If it's not factorable, I need to complete the square. The first step in completing the square would be to get rid of this. So I'm going to add it to the other side. So now I have x squared plus 2x plus something equals 6. Okay? You are going to take, to complete the square, you take half of this right here. Okay? What's half of 2? 1. Half of 2 is 2 divided by 2 is 1. What is 1 squared? So you take half of it and you square it. What is 1 squared? 1. Whatever you put on this side, you also have to add to this side. Okay? Now, because I did that, I now have a perfect square trinomial. Okay? So I can change this into x plus 1 squared equals 7. I have a perfect square trinomial. From there, I can solve. How do you solve this? We did this part yesterday. Radical. So I get x plus 1 equals plus or minus radical 7. I subtract 1 from both sides, and my answer is x equals negative 1 plus or minus radical 7. Okay? Completing the square. Now, let's talk about completing the square when my leading coefficient is not 1, because it becomes more complicated. 2x squared plus 8x, okay, plus 3 equals 0. Is this factorable? No, because 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 gives me 7. I can't get to 8. Okay? I can't get to 8 in the middle. So, what's the first step I need to do? Subtract 3. So then I get 2x squared plus 8x plus something equals negative 3 plus something. I always like to leave those blanks so I remember what I'm doing. Okay, here's the deal. If the leading coefficient is not 1, I need to get rid of that leading coefficient. How can I get rid of a leading coefficient? Not erase it. How about if I divide everything by that leading coefficient? So that you get x squared plus 4x plus something equals negative 3 seconds plus something. So I know that gives me a fraction, but that's as best as I can do right now. Now I'm to the step where I'm going to take half of this portion here and square it. What's half of 4? And what's 2 squared? 4. So I put a 4 here. I put a 4 here. Now I have a perfect square trinomial. So I can change it to x plus 2 squared equals, what is negative 3 seconds plus 4? So what is negative 1.5 plus 4?
What's the question?
Negative 1.5 plus 4. So 4 minus 1.5. 4 minus 1 is 3. 2.5. 2.5. Okay? So you can put 2.5, or I'm going to put 5 seconds because it's easier to do that way. Okay, for later. Now, what do I need to do? Radical it. So I get x plus 2 equals, okay, equals. Now here's the deal. I have a fraction. I have radical 5 over radical 2. What's wrong with that? I know I'm adding a lot of steps into this. What's wrong with that one? What can you not have in the denominator spot? A radical. How do I get rid of it? Yeah, multiply it by radical 2 over radical 2. So now you have x plus 2 equals plus or minus radical 10 over 2. Then I subtract 2 from both sides. And I get x equals negative 2 plus or minus radical 10 over 2. This literally just combined every step we've learned into one equation. It can be terrifying and overwhelming, yes. Okay, we're going to do 2 more completing the squares. Then we're going to do, we're going to save the rest. Well, yeah, we're just going to focus on completing the square today. Maybe a little bit of quadratic formula, because quadratic formula is just plugging it in to a formula and solving. Okay, how about if we have 3x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, 3x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Is that factorable? No. What is my first step? Add 5. 3x squared minus 4x plus something equals 5 plus something. Now what do I need to do? Now what do you need to do? Divide by 3 and you get rid of the leading coefficient. X squared minus 4/3 x plus something equals 5/3 plus something. Great. Now I need to take half of 4/3. Yes, I know. What is half of 4/3?
It's a number.
You're taking half and you're squaring it. 4/3 is what? 1 and 1/3, right? Yes. So if I take 4/3 and I divide it by 2, I get 1/3. Or 2/3. I get 2/3. What is 2/3 squared? Two-thirds squared should be easy. What's 2 squared?
4.
What's 3 squared? So it's 4/9. Okay? It's 4/9. Now, from there I have this. I have x minus 2/3 squared equals 5/3 plus 4/9. So I need to change this to common denominators. I need to multiply by 3. So this changes to 15/9. What's 15 plus 4? So I get 19/9. Okay, now from here what do I do? Radical. Okay, from there I have the radical, so I have x minus 2/3 equals, and I need to multiply by radical 9 over radical 9, right? Beautiful. So then you would get 19 times 9 . gonna reduce a lot. Okay. So 171 over 9, but 9. So you get 19 and a third. You get radical 19 over 3 because it reduces. Add 2/3 to both sides, and you get x equals 2/3 plus or minus radical 19 over 3. That one's a little bit more complicated. One more completing the square. X squared minus 4x plus 8 equals 0. Okay. That is not factorable because 8 would be 4 and 2, which adds to 6, or gives you 2, so it's not possible, or 8 and 1, which is 7, or 9. So subtract 8 again. X squared minus 4x plus something equals negative 8. Half of 4 is 2. And 2 squared is, so x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals negative 8 plus 4. Okay, fill in the blanks. Now, that gives me x minus 2 squared, which equals negative 8 plus 4. What's negative 8 plus 4?
4.
Not positive 4. Negative 4. Okay, so I get negative 4. So if I take the square root of that, yes, okay, take the square root of that, I get x minus 2 equals plus or minus what? Okay, not 4i. What's the square root of 4? 2. 2i. But way to remember the I. That's good. Add 2 to both sides, and you get x equals 2 plus or minus 2i. So you have a imaginary solution in this case. There are several examples of completing the square. Several examples. Okay? So, completing the square only gets super rough when we're dealing with fractions, which is unfortunate. Let's talk about doing some quadratic equations. Okay, quadratic equation. What is the quadratic equation? Mrs. McCain used to sing it to you, I think.
Was it the negative b?
Yes, negative b. Opposite of b. Over 2a. Okay, you're going to use a quadratic equation on the ones that say solve this using quadratic formula. Okay, if they give you x squared plus 3x equals 9, and they say solve it using quadratic formula, what do you need to do first? What do you need to do first? Is this in standard form? No, so what do you need to do? How do you do that? Subtract 9, so that it's set equal to 0. So I get x squared plus 3x minus 9 equals 0. Now I'm working off of this equation. Okay, what is my b? 3. 3 is the b part. This is whatever's in front of here's the a. This is my c. So I'm taking the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4. A in this case is 1. C is negative 9 all over 2a. So I get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus what is 4 times 9?
35.
Not 35.
Oh.
30. 9 times 4. 36. All over 2. Now, 9 plus 36 is 45. Yeah, oh, you were a step ahead of me. Now, I need to take 45 and I need to bring stuff out if I can. 5 and 9 go into it, which means 3 and 3, so I can take that out because it's a pair. So this ends up being negative 3 plus or minus 3 radical 5 over 2. Quadratic formula. We'll do another quadratic formula. We're going to save the word problems for tomorrow. Okay. Another quadratic formula. Let's say we have 8x squared. This will be the last one. 8x squared minus 24x plus 18 equals 0. Okay, solve using quadratic formula. What do I need to do? What's my b? 24. So opposite of this would be positive 24 plus or minus the square root of negative 24 squared minus 4 times 8 times 18 all over 2a. Whew, okay, so I get 24 plus or minus the square root of 24 squared, which is 576, minus 4 times 8 times 18, which is 576. Uh-oh. So then I get 24 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 16. What's the square root of 0? 0. So I end up getting 24 over 16. What does that reduce to? What does that reduce to? Can 4 go into both of them? Yes. Can 8 go into both of them? Okay, what's 24 divided by 8? And what is 16 divided by 8? My answer is 3 seconds. Okay, these are the two things you're going to do tonight, completing the square and quadratic formula.